Have you ever wondered why Bible teachers and theologians and scholars often refer back to the original text of Greek and Hebrew? Well, today I'm going to have a look into it and give a couple of examples and reasons why. I'm Jason, and this is the Aussie Berean. Hi everyone, I trust that your week has been good, or fortnight, or however long it's been since you've read or listened to the last podcast. But anyway, so in English, right, we have the word love, and it's got a broad usage. So we love our spouse, we love our families, we love our friends, we love cake. You know, it's the same word, but it means different things in different contexts. But in Greek and in Hebrew as well, there are specific words for specific types of love. You know, some have multiple meanings as well, depending on the prefixes or suffixes, but they are specific. So knowing and understanding it can be extremely important when you're studying Scripture and helping you to understand Scripture. And misunderstanding them or overlooking them can lead to bad interpretations, which can also birth false doctrines. Now, every instance of love in the New Testament that I can find either refers to brotherly love, family love, or unconditional love. And then even in those three categories, there are specifics with prefixes and suffixes. So some are love towards a master or a teacher, a family member, a friend, or even someone of the same kindred. And a kindred is like an ethnic group. So if you're from Pakistan and your kindreds are other Pakistanis. Now, it can get quite technical as well, which is why most teachers will use Bible study tools, concordances and commentaries. Now, I personally use Bible Hub. It's a online website, and it's got a lot of concordances in it. So it's got the Strong's Concordance, the Englishman's Concordance, and it's got the Thayer's Lexicon as well. Lots of people use the Strong's Concordance, and it's been used for years and years and years. But I find it to be pretty basic and really broad. And the Thayer's is a bit more narrow and in-depth. And it gives each definition of the word as well as where each definition is used in Scripture. So there's also Blue Letter Bible, which is another website. And sometimes it's hard to find. Like for me, it's hard to use. I haven't used a lot, but what I do find really cool is that it also has instances of where the Greek's used in the Septuagint. So now I won't get into what the Septuagint is, but basically the Old Testament was translated into Greek by 70 Jewish leaders before Jesus walked the earth, and then it was given the name the Septuagint. But I'll post some links and stuff for the websites in the show notes. Now, is it necessary for understanding the gospel message to know Greek and Hebrew? Not at all. Not at all. But it's important when a new doctrine or teaching surfaces to be able to judge it correctly. So the last thing we want to do is be divisive or cause division in the church, but we also don't want to be blindly accepting teachings or everything that we hear or read from teachers. So this is also where reading Scripture daily plays a role. So if you don't understand something, read the verses before and after for context. Now, Chris White, he's an end times teacher. He calls that concept the 20-20. So it's 20 verses before and 20 verses after. So then if you still don't understand the context or the Scripture, use a Bible study tool to get back to the original language. You know, so for New Testament, it's Greek, and the Old Testament, it's Hebrew. But of course, prayer should always be the first avenue that we use. So now there's two Greek words used for love in Scripture. And the first one is phileo and agape. Now, agape is referred to as unconditional love, and phileo is a friendship type of love. Now, there's two other Greek words for love, but they aren't used in the New Testament. The first is storgos or storgus. I actually don't know the pronunciation of that, but that's the type of love that you would have for your parents, your siblings, cousins, etc., etc. And although it's not found in Scripture, the counterpart is, which is astorgus, and that's found in 2 Timothy 3:3, and it's used to portray a loss of love for your family. So in Timothy 3:3, it starts off like this. It says, without natural affection. Now that word for natural affection is astorgos. So it says, without natural affection, truce breakers, false accusers, incontinent, fierce, despisers of those that are good. So the context here is in the last days, with perilous times, and describes what will happen. And it's also used in Romans 1:31. And so in Romans 1:31 it says, without understanding, covenant breakers, without natural affection, implacable or implaceable and unmerciful. Now the context there is it's men leaving the natural desire for women to lay with other men, and God handed them over to a reprobate mind, being filled with all these things. This is a perfect segue for the next word for love, which isn't found in Scripture, and that is eros or eros. Now this is a sensual type of love, or a type of sexual love. The English word erotic actually derives from this word. Now, with all that said, let's have a look at some of the words for love that are used in Scripture and some of the variations. So the original word, and this might be a bit hard to follow, but I've got the study tools in the notes. So even if you bring up the study tools and look for them, you could probably read along and follow along as I'm going through it. So the word is, the Strong's Concordance number is G5384. And in English it's philos. And the definition is it's friendly, beloved, or dear, or associate. And you'd use it in like, oh, I love you guys. Now, the next one is philosin or philausin, which also derives from philos. And its definition is love to do, or to do with pleasure. Like I love walking on the beach, something like that. Or in my case, I love basketball. And there's a scripture for it. It gives a good example of when this type is used. So it says, it's Matthew 6:5, and it says, and when you pray, you shall not be as the hypocrites are, for they love to pray standing in the synagogues and in the corners of the streets, that they might be seen of men. So truly I say to you, they have their reward. And there's literally stacks of specific words deriving from this type of love. And each of them has a specific usage. So remembering the original word is philo, right? Or philos. Now, when you have suffixes on the end of it, like suffixes will change what each of them means. And they're actually quite specific. So phileo is regarding with affection, right? So that's just a type of a friendly love, And then you've got Philadelphia, which is the love of Christians. So somebody who loves Christians. Then you've got Philadelphos, so loving one's brethren. And then philandros, which is a wife loving her husband. Philanthropia, the love of mankind or kindness. Philanthropos is humanely or kindly. Philaguria is the love for money. And philaguros, loving money, or the act of loving money. Philautos, loving yourself, selfishness, and philodonos, loving pleasure. The list goes on and on and on. If I'd have put them all there, it would have taken forever. But all the words derive from philos, right? That's its base word. which is used as a love for things. So it's not a worship type of love. It's not an erotic love. It's just a general type of love. And then on the other hand, there is agape, which is unconditional love. So it's a love that's given regardless of the circumstances. It's the type of love that Jesus showed the world around him. So this is the type of love that us being Christians, we're supposed to embrace and we're supposed to show. So some quick examples of agape being shown in Scripture that come to mind is a Samaritan woman at the well. Now the Jews considered Samaritans dogs. And there's a long story, a long back history with the Samaritans. They're half Jewish. Now, Jesus took the time to show this type of love to that woman who had many husbands. And also the Gentile woman whose child was sick, when she said to Jesus that even the dogs eat from the master's table. Because remember, Jesus wouldn't heal her daughter. Like, she came and asked for healing for her daughter, and Jesus said, no, I'm here to heal the Jews, or I'm here for the Jews. And she said, well, even the dogs eat from the master's table. And then, because of her faith, he showed her this type of love, and he healed her child despite refusing to begin with. And then there's the soldier whose ear Peter cut off. Now, they were enemy soldiers, they were Roman soldiers, and they came to arrest Jesus. Yet he healed the soldier's ear after Peter had cut it off, and that was a display of agape love. So in any instance, it's an unconditional love, and like phileo or philos has multiple specific uses when prefixes and suffixes are added. So again, I'll go through a few of them. So I haven't got the concordance number in here. I didn't put it in, but now the definition for agape is love and goodwill and preference. And its usage is in benevolence, for love, for goodwill, for esteem, and in some places for love feasts. And then we've got agapeo, and that is to have a preference for, to wish well to, or regard the welfare of. So we would use it as in like, I love my friends, or you're cold, would you like my jacket? That kind of an instance. And there is a usage in Scripture, and it's Matthew 5:44, and it says, "But I say to you, love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, and pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you." Now the next word is, and this one's going to be a bit harder because it's agapese. And it's of the Strong's number. It derives from G26, which is agape. And it is to love a master, or a love to a master, to God or to Christ. So it's an affectionate reverence, a prompt obedience, and a grateful recognition of gifts received. So a usage for us would be, I love God until death. That would be a reference for us. In Scripture, is verse Matthew 6:24. So no man can serve two masters, for either he'll hate one and love the other, or else he will hold to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon. So it's a love. It's a love towards God, to a master. Yeah. Now, the next one I've got on this list is agapetos, which is beloved. Now, in the Thayer's lexicon, it's got under usage, which I found interesting and put in here. It's got beloved, but with two special applications. So the first special application is of the Messiah, and the second application is of Christians beloved by God. Of Christians beloved by God, Christ, and each other. So while we see that the English word love in Scripture, sometimes it's difficult to know which type of love is being portrayed. So in any form, anyway, none of them are erotic. None of them point to sexual context, and they should never be used in arguments or doctrines claiming so. And there is quite a few out there. I'm not going to get into them because that's not what this podcast or even this episode is about. But there is quite a few out there. But what I will say is, I'm hoping censorship won't get me, but arguments for homosexuality will often quote some scriptures out of context to support their doctrines, and they can make it look believable, because of the use of the English. But if you go back to the Greek, always go back to the Greek. Check everybody's teaching. Always check teaching. Go back and see if there's a misunderstanding, and if there is, point it out to the teacher, because the teacher may have overlooked it. Now, the next word that I wanted to have a look at, the next Greek word I wanted to use as an example is brother. Okay, so like love, brother has lots and lots of meanings in Scripture. So it can mean from the same two parents, from the same father or mother, so step-siblings or half-brothers. It wouldn't be step-siblings, it'd be half-brothers. Or another Christian, someone from the same religious group. So like with love, prefixes and suffixes can also add more meanings to it, like cousin, nephew, niece, etc., etc. And sometimes it's really hard to distinguish between them. And that's, again, why we go back to the Greek. Generally speaking, though, it doesn't really cause many issues when we interpret Scripture. It's when we get into deep theology and doctrines, things can become hard to understand. Now, the root word in Greek is adelphos. It's also translated to brethren as well in some areas, and can mean different types of brethren in different areas too. So in Matthew 1 verse 2, we're looking at bloodlines, and here adelphos is used, and it's translated as a blood relative, so from the same parents. So Matthew 1:2 is Abraham begat Isaac, Isaac begat Jacob, Jacob begat Judas and his brethren. So obviously Judas and his brothers, blood brothers. And Matthew 5:47 is translated as brethren, but it means the same nationality. So Matthew 5:47 says, and if you salute your brethren only, what do you do more than others? Don't the publicans do so as well? In Matthew 23:8, it's translated as brethren, but meaning from the same religious group. So in Matthew 28, it says, but be ye not called rabbi, which is teacher, for one is your master, even Christ, and you are all brethren. Now, depending on the context, it's quite easy to determine, well, it can be easy to determine which instance requires which definition, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes it is really, really hard. Now, I went and did a search in my KJV Bible app, and I looked for the word brother in the New Testament, and it came back with 109 verses that the word brother shows up. Now, to go through all of those would be insane, and it'd just be boring to listen to. But I want to have a look at a few of them, see if I can show some differences between obvious meanings and not so obvious meanings. So one of the verses that popped up was Matthew 4:21, and it says, this is how it reads in the King James anyway, it says, and going on from there, he saw two brethren, which is the word adelphos, James the son of Zebedee and John his brother, which is adelphon, that one, in a ship with Zebedee their father, mending their nets, and he called them. So in the Greek, adelphos has been translated to brethren, referring to brothers of the same religious group, and adelphon has been translated as blood brother, so the same father. So I'll read the scripture again. Remember, adelphos has been translated to brethren, which is brothers of the same religious group. So, and going on from there, he saw two other brethren, James the son of Zebedee and John his brother. So that's James and John. Were his disciples. And then the next bit is in a ship with Zebedee, their father. So that's adelphon. With John, his brother, which is adelphon. So obviously James and John are the sons of Zebedee, which means James and John are blood brothers. It's really... When you first get into studying or going back into Greek, it can get very confusing very quickly and get very hard and take a long time on a single verse. But it gets easier the more you use it. The more you get used to it, it gets easier. But in that verse anyway, it's really easy to distinguish the differences in English. And it's confirmed in the Greek, because obviously in English, you've got brethren and you've got brother. And they both use different derivatives of the same word. But one thing I did notice when I looked in the lexicon as well was adelphos can mean either blood brother or religious brother. But because there's another form of adelphon in the same sentence, which can only mean blood brother, adelphos gets the other translation. Now, if they were both adelphos, then you'd be looking at it saying, well, are they both blood brothers, or is both instances meaning religious brothers, Christian brothers? And if they were both adelphon, you'd be asking the same thing. But because adelphon and adelphos both show up, one of them can only mean Christian brothers and the other one would mean blood brothers. So I know that's really hard to wrap your head around, but do a study on it. Do a study on it. Don't just take my word, and you should anyway. Anyone who listens to these, you should be going back and checking to make sure that I'm not making things up as I go along. And if I am and I need correction, you should always be coming to me and you've said this wrong, you've said that wrong, Jason, you've said this. Correction is good. Correction is good. But let's have a look at another passage, right? And this is the one that actually inspired me to do the episode. And there's a lot of, I'd say, controversy over this passage. But the backstory is I never read the book of John, right? Other than skim reading, and I maybe heard a podcast when I was listening to a chronological life of Jesus. So I'd never really got into the book of John. I don't know why, I just never got to it. But when I got to chapter 7, a few things didn't make sense, just because of what I'd been taught previously, so my own presuppositions. And then that's when I went to the Greek to have a look at it. And I was quite surprised, which is kind of what inspired me really to do this podcast, as I said. So now in John 7, verse 1 to 5, it says, "Now after these things Jesus walked in Galilee, for he would not walk in Jewry, because the Jews sought to kill him. Now the Jews' feast of tabernacles was at hand." And in verse 3, "His brethren therefore said to him, 'Depart from here and go into Judea, that your disciples also may see the works that you do. For there is no man that does anything in secret, and he himself seeks to be known openly. If you do these things, show yourself to the world. For neither did his brethren believe in him." So in those 5 verses, we have Jesus, we have the Jews, we have the brethren, and we have the disciples. So there's 3 groups and Jesus in those passages. Now, the Jews are easy to figure out who they are. And the disciples are the disciples, of course. But who are the brethren in this passage? So at first glance, it's really easy to gloss over it and just assume it's his followers. But His followers are distinguished because it also refers to his disciples there. So it's the brethren there is not his followers. So I went back to the Greek, and the word is adelphoi. So then I go into Bible Hub again, and I'll explain exactly how I used it. All right. So I go into Safari on my phone. I type in John 7, verse 3, John 7:3, Greek, right? And it brings up a whole lot of things that come up in the search engine, right? So then I go to the Bible Hub link, and then on the left-hand side column, it's got the number 80 and an E in brackets next to the word that's used for brethren. So I click on the 80, which brings up the Greek word with all the concordances available. I scroll down to the Thayer's lexicon. I find where it says John 7:5, and I read the description, which reads as follows: where the Lord's brethren are distinguished from the apostles. Okay. So next I go up to the description for John 7:3, which reads this way: they are neither sons of Joseph by a wife married before Mary, which is the account of the apocryphal Gospels, nor cousins, the children of Alphaeus or Cleophas, and Mary, a sister of the mother Jesus. The current opinion among the doctors of the church since Jerome and Augustine, according to that use of language, which adelphoi denotes any blood relation or kinsman, but own brothers born after Jesus, is clear, principally from Matthew 1:25 and Luke 2:7, where if Mary had borne no other children after Jesus, instead of protokos, meaning firstborn, the expression monogenes, meaning only begotten, would have been used. So this passage says that Mary had other children after Jesus. So Jesus had family. But I don't want to focus on that, okay? It's just an example of why it's good to check the original text, because our English words don't portray the whole message sometimes. Now, is it important that Jesus had brothers? No, not at all. But it can be used as a tool when you're evangelizing to somebody when you're evangelizing to Orthodox or Catholic brothers. And I will say the word brothers because they are still brothers, you know. But people who believe that Mary remained a virgin, people who say that these are children from a marriage that Joseph had previously, and there is a lot of teachings like that. There is a lot of beliefs like that, you know. But from what I read in Scripture written by the apostles who were around Jesus at the time, it says Jesus had brothers. So you could use it as an evangelistic tool. You don't use it just because it's knowledge, you know, although it's pretty cool, you know. I was quite shocked when I found that. And as I said, that's what inspired me to do this. But one thing I do want to take note of is Jesus' own family didn't believe his claims, you know, at that stage of his ministry. And we're talking about the very beginning of his ministry, but Mary was told by the angel that she would give birth to the Messiah. She knew that she was a virgin. So why would she forget later down the track? And why would her children not know? Why would you not tell your children, you know? And they'd seen the miracle that he performed at the wedding. You know, it's just weird that his own flesh and blood didn't see him for who he was, and they seemed to mock him, really. But one thing I know for certain is that if you do want to venture into Greek and Hebrew text, there is stacks and stacks of free study tools online and plenty of commentaries available as well. So what I always do is I type the verse into my web browser with the word Greek after it, or Hebrew if I'm looking in the Old Testament. And then I click on the Bible Hub link that pops up. There's also Blue Letter Bible, but, you know, as I said earlier, but Bible Hub is a lot more user-friendly. And then you just go from there. You know, it's got the Greek spelling. It's got the Greek characters. It's got the English pronunciation. It gives you instances on where it's used in Scripture, so you can match it up. They're really good study tools, man. They're really, really well put together.
But that's all I really got for this week. Anyways, you know, if I've got a few episodes that I'm working on, a few things I'm writing up. I'm looking at getting into doing the gifts of the Spirit and stuff. I mean, there's quite a few that I don't have any experience in, but just from Scripture, just have a look at them and delve into them by what Scripture says, and try and give my opinion or a little bit of a teaching on the gifts of the Spirit for people that are interested in it. And I got a few other topics and stuff that I'm working on as well, and I want to do the testimonials. I've got a few testimonies myself, and I know a few people that are looking at maybe sharing theirs with me. I've just got to work out a way to get it recorded. But anyway, guys, until the next episode, I am trying to get them out quicker. It's just taking a little bit of time at the moment with work. I'm back at work as well, which is great. Just finding the time to be alone to record is the biggest issue at the moment, because like I said, I have got a lot written out, and some others that have been started. But anyway, guys, enjoy your week and be blessed. And catches.